Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gia Vitale. I am Mayor Fry's Chief of Staff, and as Chelsea noted, I recently shared with folks at the city that I am leaving the mayor's office on January 10th. That'll be my last day. That is also coincidentally the day of the inauguration here at City Hall, which is a really important day for me to put a pretty little bow on my time in the mayor's office over the last 4 years. You're stuck with me for another month or so don't say goodbye yet. And I have promised people that I'll send a much snappier goodbye email out as I exit City Hall. My hopes and dreams for this committee, Chelsea. I think, to keep on keeping on and doing the good work of connecting what I think is a pretty broad perspective of people interested in advancing the workers' rights and how we, the city, can be a good partner in that effort. And sometimes we stumble, but I think we always pick each other up and figure out how to work better together. So I've been appreciative for folks as I've been in and out of this committee. I know I haven't been a great participant or a very consistent participant, but I hope that can be something we can figure out in my office how to do a better job of in the years to come.
Thank you, Gia, and the fact that you have come so frequently to these meetings, it's just amazing. The fact that the mayor's office and city council members are paying attention to the body of this work is really important, and to have you in that position it's been invaluable. So we appreciate seeing you.
Can I interject real quick and Gia ask about your future endeavors? I'm not sure where you're going, and I don't know if that's something you want to share either.
I'd be happy to share. I don't have anywhere to go on January 11th. And I feel pretty okay about that. I think I'm just going to take a little time and I don't know if, was I just telling this to you, Chelsea, or somebody that I talked to, that January 10th is a Monday. So I think I'm going to give myself that first week, Thursday through Friday, to not do anything, like maybe wait until 7 o'clock to walk my dog until 5:30 when she normally wakes me up. And then I think it's not in me to relax for too long, but I want to try to figure out a good balance between relaxing and also figuring out what the next thing is. So stay tuned.
Albeder.
I'm muting myself. Yay. Well, first and foremost, let me just say thank you for giving me the opportunity to introduce myself. And so I'm really excited about being here. I have been in this position for about 4 months, a little bit over 4 months. So I said 4 months, ooh, 40 and slip. I'm sorry, 4 weeks.
Feels like 4 months.
I know, I was like, that's a 40 and slip. But for a little bit over 4 weeks now. And so really just, figuring out how things work in the Civil Rights Department overall, and then really getting to know each division. And so I came to the city before in the role of outreach coordinator and engagement manager for the 2020 census. So I know I've worked with some of your organizations in that capacity. And so, but I have a background doing a number of things, engaged politically and doing some things as a appointed person with the governor. All of these things, I don't really like giving resumes, but all of these things, my primary focus is really how do we engage community? How do we have a positive impact on community? And so that's why I'm excited about the work that I will be able to do with each and every one of you. So, and let me just say this, Gia was the primary person that I got to work with and reached out to me, and then she goes and says goodbye. So I did call her and I'm like, hey, what's up with that? But I will say she made my transition so far really easy. So Gia, I appreciate you for that. And I'm really excited about working with this particular group. So thank you.
Well, and we're excited to work with you. And as I have said to all now 3 department heads over the last year,
yes,
we need you to be an advocate for us. That is the biggest that's the biggest thing that this committee needs, is like, we need an advocate in this seat that is going to fight for funding, that's going to fight for resources, that's going to fight for the voice of workers and like people who are trying to make workplaces better. So not just workers, but businesses and workers. So we need you to like fight for us. And I know you have the whole police issue and all that going on in your department, but this little scrappy little department, we need you to help us fight.
So I appreciate that. And let me just say, right now, I'm still interim, and I know you've had 3 before me, or but I will say this: that's part of my work. When I didn't go down a long resume, listen, I'm a change agent, and I have no fear of fighting for what I believe is right. And so these are things that are near and dear to my heart. So I look forward to fighting with you and working in a collaborative way, right? Because if I want to learn from you, and I don't come with all the answers, but fight is not a problem. And we do it in a way that gets results, right? So I think that's important. What I will look for, Chelsea, is I'm going to have a conversation with you and anyone else who's interested, but about what it is that we should be fighting for. What are our priorities? So I'm looking forward to that. And I don't want to take up more time on the agenda because I know I'm not officially on the agenda. So I'll let you continue.
I can't help myself. I know I talked too much in this meeting, but can I add something real quick, Chelsea?
Yes.
Interim Director Gillespie, that was a eloquent introduction, and it sounds like a department head already. And to all of you members of the committee, you hear department heads say a lot of those same things, but I want you all to know, and I mean this genuinely, and I know, of course, I would always and have always complimented my boss. That's a smart thing to do. But I have always had to explain to my 3 prior bosses, certainly, who are the members of the committee, what are your organizations, and what do you actually do, and how do you fit into, this work here. But with Interim Director Gillespie, she already knew about every single one of your organizations and then some. She knew what you do, how you fit in. She was already brainstorming all the other sort of landscape of the different organizations that are sort of in this space. So I was just so impressed and relieved that I didn't have to really bring her up to speed on what this is and what what it's all about. And she was already a few steps ahead, brainstorming, well, what about this, what about that, and how can we push that, and how does it fit in over here, and what is the real value, how does the committee actually fit into the labor standards enforcement, how does it all fit together. So I'm just so impressed and relieved so far. So, and I want the committee members to know that I think Interim Director Gillespie is going to be a truly collaborative partner and a real real asset.
So now I had a lot to live up to, but thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I mean it.
Thank you.
Well, we're looking forward to working with you. We really appreciate you being here, and just the fact that you come to this meeting on your first month it says a lot. So we really appreciate it. With that being said, why don't we do just like a quick round of intros? This is a smaller group than usual, and then maybe we'll kind of go through the agenda pretty quickly. So I'm Chelsea, president of the Minneapolis Regional Labor Federation, and I chair this committee, and I will call on folks. Let me put it in the, who's got the phone number that ends in 69?
That's me. So this is Anna. I'm the community manager at Fair State Brewing Cooperative, a brewery in Northeast Minneapolis. Great to meet you.
Ashley?
I'm Ashley Boone with the City of Minneapolis, Civil Rights Department. I don't know why I just said all that.
No, go for it. Yeah, we want to know. Brian Elliott.
Hey, I'm off camera because Teams and my computer for some reason don't get along. Brian Elliott, the Executive Director for the SEIU Minnesota State Council. Good to see you, Alberta. Congratulations on being in this role. Excited to have you here.
Thank
Kate.
you, Brian.
Kate.
Couldn't find my mute button, sorry. Kate Davenport, one of the co-presidents of Eureka Recycling, a zero waste social enterprise in town that provides a recycling service and does zero waste advocacy, and also a member of the Main Street Alliance. We have about 120 employees, so fill that small business voice role.
Merle.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Merle Payne. I'm the co-director of Seiu. And great to see you all, and looking forward to getting to know you better, Alberta, and setting up a meeting soon.
Natalie.
Hi, sorry. I'm on my phone. I'm Natalie. I'm a small business bookkeeper, and I guess, yeah, that's all that's relevant to this moment.
Thank you. All right, we will open it up to business. Usually we have a committee of like 20, and we're going to swear in some new people in January. So that's exciting to have some new people joining the committee. The next thing on the agenda is the labor standards update from Brian.
Yeah, we already got to introduce interim director Alberta Gillespie, so that's great. And I meant every word that I said. I'm very excited, and I hope. Let me just put a plug in there for. This is probably inappropriate, but maybe permanent director. I don't know if the current interim director intends on being a permanent director, but I hope so, and I also hope that the members of this committee, where there to be interest, would support making that happen. So let me just put that plug out there. I mean that. And then the next thing on our update from LSED is that we got all the reappointments done. Everyone who needed to reapply for this committee did so and was officially reappointed by the City Council and Mayor. We are also going to be joined in January by a couple of new members. One is, I'm drawing a blank on names. Ashley or Chelsea, can you help me? One is Sarah Maxwell.
And Lucas Franco.
That's right, Lucas Franco. And Sarah Maxwell is from AFSCME. And then Lucas Franco, Chelsea, can you remind me where he's from?
The laborers.
Ah, right. So we will be joined by both of them. We also, as a reminder to everyone, we still have an open business seat, business representative or business interest seat on the committee. But only one open one open seat, vacant seat for 2022, and we can fill that really at any time were we to find someone that might be a good fit. So keep that sort of in the back of your mind. If you can think of any probably medium or large business that would be a good fit for this committee, we can talk about that at a future meeting or offline. And I think that's all of the updates that I have for today.
Thank you, Brian. Next on the agenda is, why don't we start small and start with this? I'm going to mix up the agenda a little bit here. The city budget process is probably the top thing on most people's minds. So last Wednesday, they had their budget hearing, and all of the co-enforcement funding was fully restored unanimously. Does anyone want to give an update on that and speak to it?
I guess I will. Maybe I'll kick us off. Yeah, so and I think I added a couple items on the agenda. One was like budget generally, and then the other was collaborative enforcement funding.
I just kind of tied them together.
Yeah, and when I added that on there, I was it was sort of deep in budget bonanza. And I wasn't foreseeing that the budget will already have been passed by the time we have this meeting. So it is passed, as Chelsea just said. And the co-enforcement funding was fully, thanks to leadership from the mayor's office and council members, especially Gia. The full $269,000, I think, was restored. And then I believe that there was an amendment brought forward to add 100,000 in one-time money for an additional 100,000 in one-time money for 2022. And if anyone, interim director Gillespie or Merle or Gia, if you guys have any additional thoughts about that, please jump right in.
My only thought was we celebrated. I was texting Andrew. I'm like, this is awesome. So.
Well, I think what's funny is that we had like a little miscommunication between departments and all of that, but what it's created is that like now every single city council member knows what co-enforcement is. Did they know what co-enforcement was pre the budget this year? I don't think so. So now they know what co-enforcement is. And we'll have to work with the new city council members on that as well.
Yeah, I would agree that that was a positive outcome that came of it, and seeing that the additional 100,000 went through unanimously, and actually had several positive comments, or at least a couple of positive comments, thanking the leadership for moving that. That was an exciting step in the right direction. So I appreciate everyone's leadership who are here in this space who helped make that happen.
I will add something because there wasn't, a group that people reached out to me regarding this in my first few weeks. And that makes a difference. So I appreciated that. I then, of course, contacted people in the mayor's office, Gia and some other folks, of course, Brian right away. But I just want to know that really makes a difference, because it was on my radar screen, but it was only because people actively reached out to make sure that it was something that we were paying attention to. So.
Sorry, one other thing that I think is important. The name is, I don't know the exact math, but so around $182,000 was moved in ongoing funding. And then the other is one-time funding. So it's with a 369,000 in co-enforcement outreach and education funding, about half of it was moved for ongoing. So that was another good step in the direction of ensuring the sustainability of it, and still some more work to do, but a very good step in seeing that move forward.
Anything else on the budget? I don't usually work in this room, so I'm not used to a light being right above my head.
Could somebody do a very quick overview on the staffing side of the budget and what was exactly approved for 2022?
Well, I can just mention for sure that the Labor Standards Enforcement Division will continue to have 5 total FTEs, including myself, and I count that as a good thing. And I don't know if Director or if Gia, you guys want to make any broader comments about the department or city or whatnot.
I don't know that I have the exact details of additional or changes in FTEs as it relates to the department. So I'm sorry, I'm not your best person for nitty-gritty details on budget. I apologize, Merle.
And I'll say at this point, I'm still, they were well into the budget discussions when I got here. So unfortunately, I can't probably add any details, but we can work on making sure we get information and provide you with that.
All right, are we ready to round up the budget discussion? So the other big thing, like, man, we're in the city of Minneapolis. There are big things every week. The other big thing happening that's really relevant to this committee is that the Federal Reserve came out with their first minimum wage study. We did call a subcommittee meeting, and it had very, very low attendance, which is okay. But we do want this committee to be reflecting on the minimum wage studies that are coming out of the Federal Reserve. And there was quite a bit of chatter, and I don't even have the reports handy. But there was a lot of discussion about how thanks Gia for being here. There was a lot of discussion about the processes that the Federal Reserve used on that study. And I'll just open that up for discussion about the minimum wage study. It's just a few number of us, so it's not like we don't need to be so formal. We can just kind of jump in.
Well, I'll jump in. Yeah, there was, it's hard to sort of summarize. I dropped the Minneapolis Federal Reserve, their kind of overview of it on their own website into the chat. It's hard to kind of summarize. And I think the biggest takeaway was that the researchers were basically like, there are more questions than answers at this point. It's very early in the ball game. They have, I think, 6 more years of results that will be part of this study. There are really major questions that they still want to look at, and this was just like a little tiny preliminary, too early to tell, really, kind of sample. And I think stakeholders on all sides kind of saw right into the report what they wanted to read into it. Some of the bottom line, at least from the Federal Reserve researchers' perspective, was no huge effects. I think that's kind of fair. I guess I'm summarizing really generally. No huge effects on wages or employment, other than there was a large drop in employment in the restaurant industry, the subsector of the service industry that specifically looks at restaurants. And it was interesting in the presentation of the study to the city council a few weeks back. The Economic Policy Institute also gave a presentation, and it was like competing perspectives, kind of point by point. First it was the Federal Reserve, and then it was the Economic Policy Institute presenting basically like a point by point sort of takedown of this and criticizing of the, like, this is how we know that the Federal Reserve Bank study is not reliable. So it was, I feel like it kind of left the viewer, me as a viewer, and then policymakers, I imagine too, were sort of like, oh, okay, well, who, which experts do we listen to, and what does this all mean? So I think, end of the day, there are more questions than answers at this point, and it is still really early for anyone to be looking at data really through the very beginning of 2020 is what the data that they had access to. So more in future years, but obviously an important effort.
I have a question about who creates that contract with the Federal Reserve for the study.
Yeah, that contract is managed through the city coordinator's office. When the contract was first entered into, I believe it was Nuria Rivera Vandermeer was the city coordinator at that time, and the actual contract manager, I can't remember who it was originally, but it has since changed hands and is now, I'm drawing a blank, Renee Youngs in the city coordinator's office. I think at the time they put the RFP out, it was only a handful of respondents to the RFP, including the U of M and maybe one other. But I think at the time, and anyone can correct me, but I think at the time it was general consensus that everyone was pleased that the Fed planned to do this, and is doing it for free. I think not charging the city any money. So and they have access to it. They're the people at the Fed working on it, and their the data that they have access to from, I think it's Deed and Department of Revenue, is really unique in the state of Minnesota. So they're excited about looking at it in sort of a new and different way that they believe hasn't been studied before in other places. But I think that also their new and different way is maybe raising some questions about whether it's actually a good new and different way or whether it has worked or not. So anyway, that was more than your question.
Does anyone have anything to add on the minimum wage study from the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, I was glad to see that the Economic Policy Institute came and gave the counterbalance. I put in the chat here the information that they put, but it seemed to me flawed study from the Federal Reserve to look at the dates that they were looking at and be able to make any sort of claim that the minimum wage had an impact on restaurant employment when we're in the middle of a pandemic and restaurants had to close down. Like, how do you possibly factor for that? So I was really appreciative to see the information from Economic Policy Institute, as well as there's a study from Berkeley and professors that were contracted by the Federal Reserve to do a study of the study, and they had very similar conclusions. The professors in Berkeley that they in fact said that it did not seem deemed worthy of being published. It was the wording that they used.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that last part. Will you say that again? That the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis contracted scholars researchers from Berkeley to do a study of the study?
Yeah, so it's called it was a review commissioned by the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis from a professor at the University of California, Berkeley. I can forward it to folks here. It's not online, so I can't put like a link to it, but I can send a PDF version of it. Yeah, I guess my only question would be is how much longer is the contract with the Federal Reserve for, and is there an opportunity to look for an organization that does not seem to have the level of bias that this study seemed to have to me? Is there an opportunity for opening to another RFP?
I think we would. Short answer is I think we would have to defer those questions to the contract manager in the city coordinator's office, Renee Youngs, and the city coordinator herself. Longer answer is the contract goes. I think the study itself is 8 years, and it goes another 6 years. I'd have to double check. It probably says on the Federal Reserve website, but I think it goes another 6 years. It's certainly a very long study that has a number of years more to it. I didn't get the impression from anyone in the city coordinator's office, and I talked to a few of them, that they were in some way, shape, or form planning on revisiting who would be doing the study, or I don't know. Yeah, I hadn't heard that question raised at all from city in the coordinator's office or on the city side of things. But again, I'd have to defer to the contract managers.
That makes sense. I think one thing that would be at minimum that would be good to do is really the timing of when the study was published was incredibly unfortunate, that it was the day before the elections. And while I understand that it was not politically motivated, to a lot of people, it felt like it was politically motivated for a study like that to come out the day before an election. So at minimum, I think it would be good to look at the dates of when these are going to be published and not have something that would be that charged published right before an election date.
Yeah, for what it's worth, Merle, I think that's a really fair point, and I don't think anyone would really disagree. I think it was really unfortunate timing, and I think at least on the city side, and I assume on the Fed side of things, I think they realized that, and apparently they realized it too late.
All right, any other discussion on the minimum wage study? All right, now I will go back to item number 1. I apologize for jumping around, but I kind of wanted to get to the budget first because that was the hot topic. Vaccine mandates and other testing mandates and things like that. I saw St. Paul was sued. Has Minneapolis been sued yet?
Oh, not that I know of, Chelsea. Was St. Paul sued?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only thing I know I wanted to mention for sure was the Department of Labor, Federal Department of Labor guidance that came out around the, I don't even know what to call it, the vaccine mandate, the federal mandate of large employers. It probably has a fancier acronym, but that's essentially what it is. And I know, at least in the coverage of that guidance, that there had been a lot of large questions for everyone, especially on the employer side. And I think one of them was answered in that the testing, employees have to either be vaccinated or do testing. I think it's weekly testing. And the guidance says that the employer is not required to pay for that testing if that's the route that an employee opts to take. So I thought that was a worthwhile point to raise in this committee. But I'm also curious, Kate and our friends from Target are not here, but Kate, how are you feeling? How's I don't know, what's the sense of things?
I think on the one hand, we just want guidance. I mean, that's stuck in the courts, so we're like a little bit in holding pattern. I think that's confusing for us and our employees, honestly. I think there's a lot of scrambling that I know employers with more than 100 people are doing, particularly in our size. We're not a Target that has the scope and market power, not to pick on you, Target, but so just honestly, like trying to find tests, trying to find testing services. How do we make this convenient for staff? The administrative burden is pretty significant. So I'm not saying that to say it shouldn't be done, but I do think that there is some understanding for small businesses. I mean, it's thousands of dollars a week to pay to have tests provided for your staff. So you're either paying that cost or you're having to employ somebody to track all of it if you have 50 employees going all over the place. So it's just a lot to figure out, I think, for businesses in that 100 to kind of 500 employee range. It's a lot of it administrative cost. So, or if you're going to not do testing and require mandate, then you have to have all of the HR around reviewing exemptions. Is that a sincerely held religious belief? What's the legality around that? So it's a lot to manage. Again, that doesn't mean we don't necessarily support it, but it's a challenge. So I think there's still a lot of questions around it. And there are a lot of we will test your employee businesses popping up, and it's hard to know how legit they are. So.
I have a question, Kate. So if it's okay, Madam Chair. What's the cost of not testing? Do we have a figure on that in terms of sick time, time?
In terms of if we don't test, what's the implication of that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if we're big enough to really provide that data. I mean, I can tell you, we've been doing testing prior to that and have really strict COVID protocols. I don't know if I could answer that question in a really informed way of testing versus not testing.
And I know it's a pretty big question, but I just wonder if when you have employees losing, then having to take days off and, and then parents, if they got exposed at work, who then now their kids are exposed. So there's this domino effect, but just was wondering if there was any information on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I will say so at Eureka, this is not something all employers are doing, but we're still, FFCRE has gone away. The federal government's not covering COVID pay, but we are continuing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So staff do not have to use their PTO if it's related to COVID. The reason is exactly what you're alluding to, is we want to incentivize them to stay home so that we don't have an outbreak, for example, or limit the chance of that. I mean, we have a high vaccination rate, but even then, so I think there's so many kind of variables that feed in to that question. I will just say, though, we are definitely feeling the impacts of where Minnesota is with cases right now. And even when you have 85 to 90% vaccination rate, it can hit you pretty hard in terms of your staff, even if you're doing testing.
Okay.
So
thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, it's too bad that Target's not on here to provide their sort of big picture company perspective. The next thing is Mayor Fry has announced 3 work groups on government structure, economic recovery, and public safety. And I think it's actually economic inclusion. So I know I'm serving on the Economic Inclusion Committee. I don't know if anybody else on this group is serving on any of the other committees. Okay, no, but we'll come back to that once we know more. There hasn't been any official meetings or things like that yet. So as we get more, yes, Director.
I will say I'm not serving on any of those committees. I think they started to form prior to when I just arrived, but we do have a person in our office, the Chief of Staff for Civil Rights, Andrew, who is serving on the public safety. So, and they actually will have their first meeting on tomorrow morning.
I think it would be great to have an update from them at one of these public safety. We have to think about that, but it would be great if the Department of Civil Rights actually gave us an update on what these committees are doing. Even though we're workplace focused, public safety affects workplaces. So
yeah, I think it's very related, at least for an update.
I will make note of that and work with Brian on that.
We just have more and more to both of you. You're gonna regret coming to this meeting. Load up all the.
Chelsea, is a
go
meeting
ahead.
scheduled for the economic inclusion work group, or is it just?
Thursday.
Oh, okay, great. Good to know.
One of my first asks of the chair was, can we have the Department of Civil Rights and Labor Standards involved in this?
Ooh, excellent.
I'm sure Brian doesn't want any more work because look, he gave me kudos, but I'm going to tell you, he's like running 2 different divisions and trying to keep it all moving. So, but I think it would be great if he could be on that. So, you know.
Well,
I
I think
believe
the
in
biggest,
organizing.
that committee is being run by CPED, and I think the biggest conversation that we've all had in this room is that how do we break down the barriers to CPED and civil rights to work together more? I don't know that this is going to be the vehicle to do that, but that's like a long-term goal of this committee. Small business, worker related, like we know all the resources go to CPED. So how do we sort of like kind of break in there a little bit?
No, I that's good. I wasn't aware of that, but I will let you know that I've had like 3 meetings with CPED in my first few weeks here, and so and they're looking to partner with us, and so particularly this division, and so which is great. So so I'm excited about that, but then now, you know, getting past the interim piece, we'll have to, you know, like start to really formulate some strong relationships. So I think it'll be a great opportunity. This is a great time for us to work with CPED, and they've reached out already. So I don't know. Again, I agree with you, Chair, that I'm not sure if this particular work group is the vehicle, but certainly building a relationship with CPED is, I think, very important, and they're open and welcome to, you know, welcoming us.
And forgive me for my lack of knowledge, but is Andrea interim or is she the named CPED director? Andrea.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of interim people, so I'd have to.
I think off the top of my head, I might be wrong. I think she was interim and now she's permanent. I think.
I think that's accurate. But lots of work to do with them. And I talked to our former co-chair, Jim Router, this afternoon. So he has spent a lot of time in this committee talking about how the city attorney's office could help us in the labor standards division. So I called him and tried to take him up on that offer. And he says yes. So we'll see what we can do, but he did send his greetings. He did send his greetings to the rest of the committee. We do miss having Jim Router here. He was a great committee member. But I did talk to him this afternoon about co-enforcement and just sort of like the attorney. And we might have talked about this last month. I can't remember, but Choi and Freeman, the attorney generals, are pulling together a joint group on labor trafficking.
Okay.
In general. They've had one initial meeting. You know, I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but they did pull together an initial meeting on labor trafficking between the 2 counties. So, you know, the more collaboration we have against the across these jurisdictions, the better.
I agree.
Yeah, it's about labor trafficking and also about wage theft and how criminal investigations can be combined with civil investigations related to those.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Director.
No, I was just going to add, so it's the Attorney General that's convening these meetings?
No, it's the 2 county attorneys.
The county attorneys, okay.
Choi and Freeman are convening it.
Yeah, it's I think we mentioned this last month. From my perspective, it's really exciting. Really exciting work. It sounds like all of the right stakeholders are at the table, including the DOL and the Attorney General's office and the Seiu. I think you guys are there, and advocates for human rights and a lot of labor representatives, especially the different construction trades where we see labor trafficking more prevalent. And I did get to talk to, well, I got a call from one of the assistant Hennepin County attorneys to tell me about it. And it sounds like the concept at a really high level is to bring in the sheriff's offices from both Ramsey and Hennepin County, because a big missing piece of the puzzle has always been who's going to do criminal investigations. And then how does that fit in with civil investigations like we do here in the Department of Civil Rights? The police departments in Minneapolis and St. Paul just are not, I guess in a lot of ways, not equipped to do wage theft or labor trafficking criminal investigations. So the thought is that there is some existing capacity that I had never heard of before in the sheriff's offices that might kind of fill that gap. And then also kind of the entire discussion can be used as a vehicle to collaborate better with both civil and all of the different stakeholders. So it's a really exciting and much needed and hard to do collaboration across jurisdictions and levels of government and public and private and all of that. So it's more to come for sure, but I think it's very exciting.
And my apologies, Brian, because you did mention this to me when we first met. You talked a little bit about this.
Yeah. So,
Brian?
go ahead, Brian.
Brian Elliott.
No, I was just going to, it can wait. I was just trying to, go ahead. Go ahead, Merle.
I was just going to name it, thinking about the role of Minneapolis police in what that body is. And I know that they may not have the capacity, or it might not be the right place to do the investigative things on wage theft, but at the least, I think that there's some steps that we could take with the Minneapolis police related to, I know the trade unions have sent organizers to go on some job sites where by federal law, they have the right to go on the job sites to talk to their members. And they've been kicked off by the owner of the job sites illegally. And at minimum, working with the police so that the police aren't accidentally overstepping boundaries of what federal law and protections are that protect workers.
Okay, Brian Elliott.
It's another topic. It can wait till the next point of the agenda.
Anything else on this topic? Wasn't even on the agenda, but we worked it in. All right, Brian Elliott, to you.
All right, and apologies for if you hear my kid practicing piano in the background. Sorry. So the thing that I just wanted to raise, and also Chelsea, you and I maybe should connect. One of the priorities that Seiu and SEIU and some of our partners have been talking about in the city of Minneapolis for next year, sort of via ordinance, is the creation, is sort of taking the downtown worker council to the next level, which in short terms means creating an actual labor standards board that that would be made up of workers and representatives of workers, representatives of employers, and representatives from the city or community stakeholders. And the idea is to create a mechanism by which sector-specific groups can be called to dig in when there are issues around in a given industry, or in a given geography. The Downtown Worker Council really is the, to build off that, most of the workers who are involved in the Downtown Worker Council are retail and fast food. And so having a group come together that is talking about downtown retail, for example, downtown retail and, including fast food, that may or may not be the actual employers. It may be the building owners in this particular case, the downtown building owners, because they're really the ones that can implement changes through their lease agreements. But really, I could see another group coming together to talk about, let's say janitorial or whatever. The idea being that when in industries with particularly low wages, or it could be a particularly high rate of complaints or labor standards complaints or labor standards violations, or it could even be a process in which workers are petitioning for it. A group coming together within a sector or a sector and geography to dig in on how to improve wages and working conditions in a given industry, in that sector. You've seen this at a more limited level in some states where you've seen wage boards in states like New York, where you've got wage boards, but it's going to be something we're going to be working on. It is, in our belief, key to this question of economic improvement and economic prosperity. And so in particular, the Workplace Advisory Committee, the work that we've been doing at the city has really helped a lot of workers, in particular non-union workers. And this is sort of, I think, the next step in being able to help a lot of workers in who are not represented, who just don't have the representation of a union, who don't have really much ability to organize based on the structure of the industries, who can actually benefit hugely from the work that we're doing here at the city. So I really just sort of wanted to put that out there as the sort of thing that we see really focusing on from the perspective of SEIU and Seiu. I don't want to speak for you, Merle, but I know we've been in a lot of conversations about this, so I feel like I might be fairly representing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
That's great. I have two more things on the agenda. Well, first, does anyone have any reflections on what Brian Elliott just reported on? I think having an update on the Downtown Workers Council for next month would be great. So the last two things on the agenda is the Bloomington update. I actually haven't heard anything. There was a discussion at the last, and Wade is not on tonight, but there was a discussion at the last meeting around seasonal employees. And we were able to provide some feedback about how some people just totally lost their earned sick and safe time during the pandemic because, and what do we have, a 90-day?
Yep.
90 day? Yeah, we have a 90-day.
Yeah, when an employee is let go or their employment ends and they are rehired after, if they're rehired within 90 days, the accrued sick and safe time has to be reinstated, but after 90 days, it does not have to be reinstated. So a seasonal employee who works summers would accrue during one summer, but then lose it by the time they get back the following year.
Yeah, and a lot of the people who were laid off during the pandemic ended up losing it as well because they were laid off for more than 90 days. Anyway, so that was like the big sort of flashpoint in Bloomington, apparently, is what I heard secondhand. So they're still going through it. I don't have an update. Wade's not here, but they're looking to pass it in the next 5 months. Their first earned sick and safe time policy. So it's exciting.
Is there any very quick summary on what they're thinking related to enforcement of it?
The latest that I heard, but I haven't heard an update since then, is that they were thinking about their deputy city attorney. And they are favorable towards a private right of action, which I believe we don't have in Minneapolis.
Correct.
Right, we got it for minimum wage, but not for sick time.
I apologize, Wade's not here. He has all the details. I just have the summaries. Okay, the last thing on the agenda then is ARP money and where that's going. And should some of it be used for enforcement and co-enforcement of these laws? What do people think?
Yes. Look, I'll let Merle talk, but right, this is the question of the remaining 50 million that the city has not yet allocated, that I understand is going to be worked on next month, if I've got the timeline right. So yes.
Brian, I thought you were about to break out into a musical there with the music in the background, and you were going to do a sing along with it. I was excited. Yes, so I think it was a good first step to see that the funding was moved back to 269,000, and then there was 100,000 in one-time funding. It is a step in the right direction. Just a reminder and remembering for ourselves that the Workplace Advisory Committee was counseling for 8 full-time staff at LSED and $800,000 in outreach and education. I can understand that there would be reservations from the city around ARPA funding being one-time funding and not wanting to do hires with that funding. Would want to have a deeper conversation than just leaving it that. But I would like to think about that piece, but also thinking about ARPA funds as a way to move the funding more towards alignment of what the Workplace Advisory Committee has been advising the city for the past couple of years.
And when we hopped into the budget, I apologize, I forgot to give the background that I just assumed everybody knew that we had to kind of fix the budget. So the co-enforcement money, I'm looking at this, yeah, the co-enforcement money accidentally went away because it got changed from one-time money, from ongoing money to one-time money. And then we had to fix that this year. It was a huge collaboration between the mayor's office and the city council. And that goes back to my comments about, well, now everybody knows what co-enforcement was, even though they didn't know what it was before. So I apologize for glossing over that bit of detail. But yes, I think that people are looking at ARP funds to sort of like keep this notching up and up and up and up and up to where we need it.
Yeah.
And workers, workers.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Workers and businesses, like, they're just decimated right now, especially the small workers and I mean, the small businesses and the workers have worked for small businesses. They're like, so this is, even though it might be one time, it's very clearly in the lane of what ARP funds are designated for.
Right.
And this might be another example. I apologize. I don't really know any of the answers. This might be another example of the Civil Rights Department going through 4 different people, 4 different directors in 1 year. But unfortunate timing as it relates to ARPA funding. And I don't actually know what the mechanisms were in the city to like figure it all out. But and I don't know that those are still open to the department. I don't know, Director Gillespie, do you have any sense of how far along that process is, or what that process really looked like?
A little bit. I would say probably the second round of funding, there's still probably some opportunity, but we'd want to move quickly. So, and I won't say 100%, but I still think there's opportunity with that second round of funding. And then we always can, see what can be done at a federal level and applying for resources, from that perspective. I don't know if we've done it in the past, but it's certainly something that we could consider doing. We just need to do a little more research about that. So.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering if concretely the Workplace Advisory Committee did put together a recommendation to the mayor and I believe the city council about moving the 8 full-time staff as well as 800,000 for outreach and education. I was wondering if we could do an updated version of the letter that would still naming this is still a priority, the Workplace Advisory Committee, and we see that the ARPA funding is a path to move in that direction, so that there would be a letter coming from the Workplace Advisory Committee, I think going both to the mayor and to the incoming city council, who both would have some influence over that.
I can certainly help draft or edit a letter using the existing recommendations that have come from this committee a few times. I would just need to confirm who exactly to send it to on behalf of the committee, but I think we can probably figure that out.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we actually don't want to edit the existing letter because it's the same letter that they've gotten for 5 years, 4 years. So we might want to just say like, this is shorter and more direct about the ARP funding.
Right. Okay.
So just a quick question. What's been the response for the last 4 or 5 years to the letter?
We've been funded, and until this last little hiccup, which
okay.
I think it was really a hiccup. I don't think it was an actual intentional issue. We've been funded, but like this hiccup required city council members and the mayor's office to really know what co-enforcement meant. So it's been positive.
I think we have seen it moving in the right direction, and then when COVID hit and the impact that it had on the city budget, that called into question just like the world, not just this. And so there was that hiccup, and I think that this is an opportunity to keep it moving in the direction that it was headed initially. And a second piece to that, I'm wondering on the small business outreach and education side, I've not been tracking that as much, and I wonder if anyone knows what kind of budget has been allocated for the small business outreach and education component of this.
You mean, yeah, inside CPED, the small business office? Is that what you're talking about, Merle? Yeah,
and the resources for outreach and education, yeah.
A really good question about the 2022 budget. I guess I didn't look at the final numbers there, but just in general, that office has grown and grown and grown. year over year. And they actually have several new staff members that are coming in now or very, very soon. Actually, just heard from them. We're going to kind of meet and give them a quick overview of labor standards ordinances and just what it is and what we do. But yeah, no, that's a good thing. I will look into that. The only other thing I'll note is that Main Street Alliance. I heard from our friends at Main Street Alliance and Janice Fine from Rutgers University and another scholar. Who was it? Jen Round. And I can't remember if she's at Rutgers now or somewhere else. But anyway, they want to look at very intentionally the relationship between the Small Business Office and labor standards enforcement in Minneapolis, and even more intentionally, just at the question of how and what are the barriers or obstacles for particularly really small businesses complying with labor standards, and how can we think about helping them comply, or how what can we do about that problem in addition to just enforce case by case or business by business enforcement, which of course is always and also important. So anyway, there's more questions than answers there, but an effort from the Main Street Alliance and some scholars to look specifically at Minneapolis and try to figure out some of those larger questions around how do you really get not just how do you enforce really efficiently, but how do you actually achieve compliance across industries, geographies, and particularly really small businesses and in immigrant enclaves, etc. So that goes to your question, Merle. I was just talking to them last week about that. So I will, but I will look at the small business budget for 2022, the Small Business Office budget, and share that with everybody.
That's great, thank you. And Kate, I don't know if Kate Davenport, I don't know if you're still on the call, but curious if there, from y'all's perspective, if there is a need to advocate for more funding around small business outreach, and if we should include that as we're doing that kind of ask.
I think she just logged off and now she's logging back in. Hold on. Kate, I don't know if you caught that question.
I didn't. Sorry, I lost my audio for some reason. What was the question?
We're looking at a follow-up letter around outreach and education funding and leveraging ARPA funds to move more towards the path of what we're thinking about for outreach and education for workers' rights. And I'm wondering on the small business outreach and education side, if there's a need to push for more funding to move in that direction coming from ARPA funds, and if that should be a part of the ask.
Yes, I think it should. I would want to touch base with Davis about the number. She's a little more in touch with that, so I can circle back. But yes,
great, thank you.
It should.
And does that always go through CPED, or has that traditionally gone through CPED, or has that gone through labor standards?
No, it's a standalone. There is probably bigger than labor standards enforcement at this point. The Small Business Office, I think that's the official name. It was combined a couple years ago, was sort of combined with the BTAP programming. And it's a really substantive, robust, well-funded operation that they have. And yeah, it's always been inside of CPED. Or no, actually, I take that back. When Main Street lobbied for the creation of a small business office at the time that the Sick and Safe Time ordinance was passed, it was originally housed in the city coordinator's office. It lived there for, I want to say, a year or two, and then was moved to CPED. I guess a year or
is anyone doing active business education?
Yeah, I mean, that's all they do. It's certainly not exclusive to labor standards ordinances by any means. In fact, that's always been kind of a challenge, the question of how much or whether at all they do much outreach and engagement specific to labor standards. But they certainly are all the time, that's all they do is kind of liaison to different small businesses and getting them pointed in the right direction within city bureaucracy for all the different things that they need to do, whether it be licensing, et cetera, funding.
Well, we are coming up to 5:30 and we have a small crew. Does anyone else have anything they want to add into the discussion?
I think the only thing I wanted was just to make sure that we're clear on next steps. It sounded like Brian was going to work on a follow-up letter, and maybe you and I can be in touch about that, Brian. And then Kate, you are going to reach out to Davis about any need for additional funding moving towards outreach and education for small businesses, and you could follow up with Brian about that to make sure that that would be included if needed. Is that right?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
And that sounds good to me, Merle. I'm happy to help either edit or draft or what have you, and then we can all sort of put our brains together to figure out how to best use the letter.
Right, because we have the new incoming city council. There's a lot of change happening at the mayor's office, as Gia announced. So. All right, any other discussion topics? I have one question. When is the city going back to in-person meetings?
Ooh, probably no time soon. I haven't heard, or maybe I just didn't open and read the emails coming from the clerk's office. Ashley, can I put you on the spot? Not that you know the answer, but have you heard anything at all about, in-person meetings or whether or not other boards and commissions are doing them or anything?
The last ABC meeting that I went to, there hasn't been a talk as to a particular date as to when we'll come back to in-person meeting. A meeting before that, I believe that was sometime in October. There was talk about January, but that may have changed now with the whole new normal, or what is it called?
Yeah, next normal.
Next
normal quickly got delayed, I think. And
Right,
everyone's
so-
probably figuring it out day by day. TBD yet again.
Yep, pretty much.
All right, well, we'll continue to be virtual then for the time being.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Brian Walsh. Thank you, Ashley. You guys do so much to staff this committee and keep us all going. I can't say enough thanks to what you all do, and welcome, new director. And I'm so glad to have you here. And I'm excited about what we can do in the next year. I think everyone's focus now is like what's happening in workplaces is important. So.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. I think I'm gonna say adjourn. We adjourn.
All right. Thank you. Bye,
Great.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. See you later.
Thank you.